That black, crusty ring around your stove burner isn't dirt. It's armor. It's been baked on so many times at such high heat that it's basically turned into a ceramic coating, and no amount of scrubbing with a wet rag is going to touch it. I've walked into kitchens where people spent 45 minutes attacking a burner with steel wool and a prayer, and they still couldn't get through it. Meanwhile, I fixed the same burner in about 15 minutes with something that costs less than a candy bar. Here's what actually happens on your stovetop. Every time you cook, bacon grease popping out of the pan, a sauce boiling over, a little oil splash you don't even notice, some of that lands on the burner grate, the burner cap, or the drip pan underneath. Most people wipe the stovetop itself because that's what they see, but the burner components get ignored because they're not right in your line of sight, and because who wants to touch something that was on fire 20 minutes ago? So that grease sits there, and the next time you turn the burner on, it heats up again, and that grease doesn't burn away, it bakes. Think of it like seasoning a cast iron pan, except nobody wanted this seasoning, and it's ugly instead of useful. Layer by layer, cook after cook, that grease turns into a hard, glossy, blackened shell. By the time most people notice it's a problem, it's not one layer of grease anymore. It's 15 or 20 layers fused together, practically welded onto the metal. I see this constantly with gas stove grates and with electric coil drip pans. The grates are cast iron or porcelain-coated steel, and grease loves to grab onto every little pit and pore in that surface. The drip pans are usually cheap stamped metal with a thin coating, and once that coating gets scorched enough times, grease bonds to it almost permanently. People assume they need new grates or new pans. 9 times out of 10, they don't. They just never dealt with layer number 1, so now they're fighting layer number 20. And here's the part that gets missed. This isn't just a looks problem. Baked-on grease is flammable. A thick enough buildup can actually catch and smoke the next time you're cooking on high heat, especially if something spills onto it fresh. I've had people tell me their kitchen smells weird every time they use a certain burner, and it's not the food. It's decade-old grease slowly smoking off every single time that burner gets hot. Grease is fat, and fat behaves in a very specific way once it hits repeated high heat. The first time it gets heated, it partially breaks down and oxidizes. That's a chemical reaction where the fat molecules bond with oxygen in the air and start to polymerize, which is a fancy way of saying the molecules link together into longer, tougher chains. That's the exact same reaction that happens when you season a cast iron skillet on purpose. It's not an accident. It's just physics and chemistry doing what they do, except in this case, it's happening on a burner nobody's cleaning. Every time you cook again, a fresh layer of grease lands on top of the old, already hardened layer. That new layer heats up, polymerizes, and bonds to the layer underneath it. This keeps happening cook after cook until you've got this thick, cross-linked, carbonized coating that is chemically similar to varnish. That's not an exaggeration. Old-school varnishes were literally made by cooking down oils until they polymerized into a hard, glossy finish. Your burner is doing the same thing, just uglier and by accident. This is why plain soap and water does nothing once the buildup gets bad. Soap breaks down fresh grease because it can surround fat molecules and lift them off a surface, but it can't break carbon-to-carbon bonds in a polymerized, baked-on coating. At that point, you're not cleaning grease anymore. You're trying to dissolve a plastic-like coating, and dish soap was never built for that job. I learned to spot the difference between fresh grease and cooked-on grease just by looking at it and touching it. Fresh grease feels tacky and comes off on your finger. Cooked-on grease is hard, sometimes glossy, sometimes black matte, and it doesn't budge when you drag a niffer nail across it. Once it's in that second stage, you need something that can actually break the chemical bonds, not just lift surface residue. That's the whole game here. Mistake 1. Scrubbing dry with steel wool or a scraper. People go straight for the most aggressive tool they own because the problem looks aggressive. But dry scrubbing baked on grease mostly just polishes the top layer and scratches the metal or the porcelain coating underneath it. On porcelain-coated grates, this is actually one of the worst things you can do. You're grinding away the protective coating, which means the bare metal underneath is now exposed and will rust, and grease will bond to that rough surface even faster next time. You end up doing more damage while barely touching the actual grease layer. Mistake 2. Dumping a ton of harsh oven cleaner on it and walking away. Oven cleaner sprays are strong. They're built to eat through baked-on carbon in an oven cavity. But a lot of people either use way too much, don't ventilate the area, or leave it on so long it starts eating into the metal finish, not just the grease. I've seen burner caps come out with a dull, pitted look because someone left heavy-duty oven cleaner sitting on them overnight, thinking longer equals better. With most of these chemicals, there's a sweet spot for contact time, and going past it just damages the part you're trying to save. Mistake 3. Soaking in hot soapy water and calling it done. This one's not wrong exactly, it's just incomplete. Hot soapy water will loosen the outer layer of grime, sure, but if the buildup has multiple polymerized layers, soap alone can't break through all of them. People soak for 20 minutes, wipe it off, see some improvement, and stop there, thinking they've solved it. Really, they've only removed the newest, softest layer. The old hardened core is still sitting underneath, and it'll keep collecting new grease right on top of itself. Here's the method I actually use, and it costs you about $2 in baking soda if you don't already have a box in your pantry. Stage 1. Remove the parts. Take off the burner grates, burner caps, and drip pans, whatever comes off your stove. Don't try to clean any of this while it's still attached. You need full access to every angle, and you need to be able to submerge the pieces, not just wipe at them while they're bolted down. Stage 2. Make the paste. Mix baking soda with just enough water to form a thick paste. You're looking for something close to the texture of toothpaste, not runny, not crumbly. For grates and caps with heavy buildup, I like adding a few drops of dish soap into that paste too. The soap helps break the surface tension and gets into the grease a little faster, but the baking soda is doing the real work here. Baking soda is mildly alkaline. Grease and the carbonized residue from cooked oil are acidic in nature once they've broken down. When you introduce something alkaline, it starts a chemical reaction that softens and loosens those bonds. This is the same basic principle behind why alkaline degreasers work in commercial kitchens, just in a much gentler, food-safe form you already have in your cabinet. Stage 3. Apply and wait. Don't skip this part. Slather the paste thick, covering every blackened spot completely. Don't just dab it on and start scrubbing right away. Let it sit for at least 20 minutes. If the buildup is really heavy, we're talking years of neglect, give it closer to an hour. This waiting period is where the actual chemistry happens. Scrubbing too early means you're fighting hardened grease with muscle instead of letting the paste do its job first. Stage 4. The vinegar reaction. Once that sits, spray or pour white vinegar directly over the baking soda paste. It's going to fizz. That's the acid in the vinegar reacting with the alkaline baking soda, and that bubbling action physically lifts grime up off the surface, while the chemical softening continues underneath. Let that fizz and settle for another 5 to 10 minutes. Stage 5. Scrub with the right tool. Now, and only now, go in with a scrub brush, a stiff nylon brush, not steel wool, not a metal scraper. For porcelain grates especially, metal tools will scratch the coating even after the grease is softened. A nylon bristle brush or even an old toothbrush for tight corners will cut through softened grease without damaging the surface underneath. You'll feel the difference immediately. Instead of fighting the buildup, it's coming off in sheets. Stage 6. Rinse and dry completely. Check every groove and edge, since baking soda residue left behind can look chalky once it dries. Dry the pieces fully before putting them back on the stove. Installing wet parts onto a hot appliance invites rust, especially on any exposed metal. Pro tip: for cast iron grates specifically, once they're clean and completely dry, rub a very thin layer of cooking oil onto them with a paper towel before you put them back on. This does the same thing seasoning does for a cast iron pan. It creates a light protective layer that makes the next grease spill wipe off easier instead of bonding directly to bare metal. My grandfather did this on every cast iron piece in his shop, appliance or not, and it's the reason his grates never looked as bad as everyone else's, even without cleaning them every single week. There's one step in this whole process people skip almost every time, and it's the one that actually determines whether this works or not. That wait time after applying the paste. Skip that, and you're back to scrubbing with your arm instead of letting the chemistry do the heavy lifting. And here's something most people don't think about. The drip pans under your coil burners, if you've got an electric stove, are usually in worse shape than the grates because nobody ever looks at them. We'll get into those specifically in a second. One more thing worth knowing before you try this. Not every stovetop surface handles vinegar the same way, and there's one type of finish where I'd actually tell you to skip it entirely. Stick around because getting that wrong can do real damage. If your stove has those metal drip pans under the coil burners, the same paste and vinegar method works, but you'll want to give them extra soak time since they're usually stamped from thinner metal that holds heat differently, and the grease tends to bake in even deeper, around the edges where the pan curves up. Don't be surprised if you need to repeat stage 3 and 4 twice on a drip pan that's been neglected for years. That's normal, not a sign you're doing it wrong. Now, about that surface I mentioned, if you've got a glass or ceramic glass stovetop, meaning a flat top electric range, do not use the baking soda and vinegar combination directly on the glass surface itself the same aggressive way. Vinegar's acidity is fine in small amounts, but scrubbing glass top surfaces needs a different approach entirely, with a razor scraper held at the right angle and a cleaner made specifically for ceramic glass, because regular scrubbing can put fine scratches into that surface permanently. This method here is built for grates, caps, and drip pans, metal and porcelain-coated parts, not the glass cooktop itself. That's the whole method, and it works because you're using chemistry to do the work instead of your shoulder. 2 ingredients, 20 minutes of patience, and grates that look like they came out of a showroom instead of a diner that's been open since the 80s. If your stove has been sitting there with that black ring for months because you figured you needed to replace the grates, try this first. I'd bet money it saves you the cost of new parts. Let me know in the comments what's giving you the most trouble in your kitchen right now, whether it's the stove, the oven glass, or something else entirely. I read those and pull ideas straight from what people are actually dealing with. And if you're dealing with a glass top range instead of gas grates, I've got a full video on cleaning those without scratching them. That one's a completely different method, so go check it out next. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of stuff. Real methods, not internet myths.